Brad Olsen is the principal economist at Infometrics and joins me now after spending all day poring over the details of this year's budget. So, Brad, how's your day been, first of all, and have you come up with a name for this budget?
Yes, Sam, look, it's a very energetic day. Budget day is always a big one for economists, for politicians, trying to dissect a lot of information in a very small space of time. I think we've done not too bad this year because there is a lot of detail. I've given this budget the title of the Switch It budget because you were seeing in some areas you get money, but in other areas you're having it taken away. So there is very much a feeling that you're robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit. That's the difficult fiscal position the government finds itself in.
OK, the Switch It budget. So let's have a look at some of that. So Kiwi contributions have been slashed, Best Start payments slashed. Both are now going to be means tested. So a lot of cash saved there for the government.
That's true. If you look at the likes of those KiwiSaver changes, the government is limiting back just how much the government contribution will be, going from just over $520 at a maximum down to $260, and at the same time then ensuring that there is no government contribution at all for people earning over $180,000. That sort of makes sense. An extra $500 or even $260 for someone earning over $180 just doesn't seem all that important. So some sensible changes to try and save the government some money without trying to shift too much how much that level of savings comes through. At the same time, though, changing or increasing those contribution rates at the moment, 3% is the default. That'll increase over the next couple of years to 4% for both employees and employers and stimulate a bit more savings. You mentioned the likes of Best Start as well, now being means tested in the first year. Best Start, of course, being the government's tax rebate for when you have a child. But while that one will be means tested, at the same time, the government is increasing how much some families will get from the likes of the Working for Families program of up to something like $360 a year. So again, you're sort of seeing pushes and pulls in this budget, money that is being spent in some areas that's had to be paid for by savings in others.
Brad, the Finance Minister Nicola Willis said going into this that there would be no lollies in this budget. But let's talk for a minute about this tax incentive. It's worth $1.7 billion a year for businesses. That sounds like a pretty big carrot to me.
Look, it's certainly a big opportunity, I think, for a lot of businesses. We know that New Zealand's productivity has been woeful over time. One of the reasons for that is because we don't invest in the right kit. We know that businesses often use their old stuff for a lot longer than they probably should because it feels like it's expensive to upgrade. These tax changes through the investment boost that the government is bringing through means that if you buy some new kit, some new equipment, some new sort of processes in that in your business, you can immediately deduct 20% of the cost of that new investment off. That becomes a cost on the books for your business, and that means that overall you get to lower how much tax you're going to have to pay at the end of the year. So it becomes a whole lot more reasonable for businesses to invest in new kit and equipment. That new level of sort of machinery and so on that comes through, I think that will pay dividends. Treasury expecting this change, although it's expensive to add something like a whole percentage point to GDP over the next 20 years. It doesn't sound like a lot, but I think it will shift the dial for businesses, gives people some new kit. Probably means you'll have a few people doing some odd investments. There's probably a few more utes and similar that will be purchased, but on the whole, I think a really good move for businesses, but it's expensive.
Yeah, a bit of a cash injection there for businesses. And meanwhile, revelations that more than $3 billion a year will be saved through the government's pay equity law change. And we have protests happening outside Parliament as we speak about that.
There have been some big changes there. Of course, we were all waiting to try and get the details on what was coming through from the pay equity changes. In the budget documents today, $13 billion worth of savings over the next 4 years or so. That was money that was previously expected to be spent. The government's still leaving some money in the budget ongoing for pay equity claims as they come through under the new system, but they're not telling anyone what that figure is. Effectively, it's somewhere that the government can't disclose. It doesn't want to prejudice and sort of take forward some of those negotiations and put itself in a bad bargaining position. But long story short, some of the big savings today, the biggest single savings coming from the pay equity changes to pay for a number of these other initiatives. So again, some big ins, but some big outs. And I think people will be asking questions about, are these the right trade-offs? The government did need to make some, but it's a pretty big shift.
Yeah, I just want to touch on also this move to get rid of job seeker payments for 18 and 19-year-olds. Of course, this happening in an economy where it's difficult to get a job, where there's rising unemployment. What do you make of that?
Indeed, the government, the government has made this change where effectively you'll have to have some sort of parental assessment gone through first. If your parents have already got enough money to support you as an 18 or 19-year-old, then you won't just immediately be able to jump on the likes of the job seeker benefit. This again sort of showing that means testing shift that seems to be coming through, and a broader evolution, I think, where government is saying, look, we're not going to be first port of call for everything. In fact, it's going to be back on communities, it's going to be back on households to go, you look after yourself first. If you can look after your 18 or 19-year-old, then you should, and only if you can't does the government step in. So coming in as a support rather than the immediate step forward there when it comes to changes. But again, a wider piece here where I think government, of course, trying to make some savings, but also trying to limit just how big the size of government has been. We know, looking at the fiscal numbers, that the amount of spending going from government out into the economy still won't be below 31% of GDP until 2029. Of course, it didn't even hit 30 before the pandemic. So the whole size of the state has changed. The amount of money going into the economy from the government has changed. And I think over time, the government wanting to try and adjust that back. But again, some bigger shifts from what we had before to what we will have in the future. Very much a number of areas of the government's spending plans where they will have to limit that spending to achieve other initiatives out the other side.
Brad, final thoughts. What does this budget leave open for next year's all-important pre-election budget?
Look, the government's still got a pretty narrow fiscal opportunity going forward. There's not a lot of additional money that comes through, and a lot of additional things the government's going to need to spend on. You've got pressures always in the health system, in the likes of education. You've got some of these pay equity claims that will still come through under the new system. Government's got to be able to afford all of those. But I think the difference going forward is that we will see more of what has happened in Budget 2025, and that's that the government will be looking to not only make some more spending commitments when it comes to next year's budget, but those new spending commitments, they'll have to be paid by further cuts, further reprioritisations in other areas. So just because government is spending on something this year doesn't automatically mean that it will continue to do so in the future. Everything up for grabs as we head forward now to Budget 2026.
Okay, Brad, thank you so much for your thoughts today. Brad Olsen, Principal Economist at Infometrics. Tēnā koe.